Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. Picture a town, a gorgeous little town tucked away in the heart of America, where everything just seems to click with nature. The countryside spreads out like a quilt of thriving farms, golden fields of grain, hillsides dotted with fruit orchards. When spring arrives, the blossoms create these white, dreamy clouds drifting over bright green fields. Come autumn, the oak, maple, and birch trees explode into color, this incredible fiery show against the dark green pines. You can hear foxes calling from the hills at night, and deer glide silently through the fields in the morning fog. The streams run crystal clear and ice cold, with trout hanging out in shady pools, waiting for someone patient enough to catch them. And the air? It's alive with birdsong, robins, catbirds, doves, jays, so amazing that people would travel hundreds of miles just to experience it. This town had been like this forever, since the very first people settled there. Then something weird started happening. This strange sickness crept in. It was like an invisible curse had settled over everything. Chickens got sick with diseases nobody could identify. Cattle and sheep started dying off. Death seemed to hover over the whole place. Doctors were scratching their heads over new illnesses popping up in their patients. People were dying suddenly, without explanation. Even kids, who'd be running around 1 minute and gone the next. And then came this eerie silence. The birds, where did they all go? Those mornings that used to practically vibrate with birdsong were now dead quiet. It was spring, but with no voices. The apple trees bloomed, but no bees showed up to pollinate the flowers, which meant no fruit. The roadsides that used to be so pretty were now lined with brown, withered plants, like something had scorched them. The streams were empty. Every fish had died. What kind of dark magic, what enemy could have silenced all this life? The people themselves had done it. That haunting story is how Rachel Carson kicks off her masterpiece, Silent Spring. She tells us that town isn't real, but every single one of those disasters has actually happened somewhere. When this book dropped in 1962, it wasn't just a book. It was a bombshell. It rattled the chemical industry to its core, transformed how governments operated, and basically launched the modern environmental movement. We're talking millions of copies sold and countless lives saved, not just birds and fish, but actual human beings too. The author, Rachel Carson, wasn't some firebrand activist or politician. She was this quiet, careful marine biologist, a scientist with the soul of a poet. She loved nature with this deep, almost spiritual passion, and she wrote about it with such clarity and beauty that she captivated millions of readers. But she and her fellow scientists had started noticing something alarming: the reckless, widespread use of new chemical poisons after World War II. She realized she couldn't stay quiet. "There would be no peace for me," she wrote to a friend, "if I kept silent." The chemical industry threw hundreds of thousands of dollars at trying to destroy her reputation. They painted her as some ignorant, hysterical woman who wanted bugs to take over the world. But she held her ground, armed not with opinions, but with years of meticulous research and facts you just couldn't argue with. Today we're going to explore Silent Spring together, and here's my promise. By the time we're done, you'll see the world around you completely differently. You'll understand these invisible threads connecting all living things, from the tiniest microbe in the dirt to the eagle soaring overhead. And you'll discover what Carson called our obligation to endure, which sounds heavy, but it's really about understanding our place in this incredible web of life. This isn't just a story about pesticides. It's about the intricate beauty of life itself, the dangers of human arrogance, and nature's stunning ability to fight back. For most of human history, our relationship with the environment was pretty straightforward. We adapted to nature, and it shaped us. Our power to actually change the world around us was pretty limited. But the 20th century flipped the script. For the first time ever, one species, us, gain the power to fundamentally alter the nature of the world. And the scariest part of our attack on the environment, Carson tells us, is contaminating the air, earth, rivers, and seas with dangerous, even deadly materials. She wasn't talking about factory smoke or industrial waste. She meant something more sinister, something being deliberately sprayed from the sky: synthetic pesticides. This whole industry was basically born from World War II. While developing chemicals for warfare, scientists stumbled onto substances that killed insects. The first and most famous was DDT. Almost overnight, DDT became this miracle weapon, a way to wipe out insect-borne diseases and help farmers win their war against pests. The guy who discovered it even won a Nobel Prize. Because soldiers and refugees were dusted with it during the war to fight lice, people started believing DDT was basically harmless to humans. But Carson reveals this was dangerously wrong. She explains that these new synthetic pesticides were totally different from the older, natural bug killers made from plants and minerals. These new chemicals, the chlorinated hydrocarbons like DDT, dieldrin, and heptachlor, plus the organic phosphates like parathion and malathion, packed enormous biological punch. They weren't just poisons. They could sneak into the most vital processes in your body and mess them up in sneaky, often deadly ways. They could destroy the enzymes protecting us, block the processes giving us energy, and even trigger the slow, irreversible changes leading to cancer. Carson argued the term insecticide was dangerously misleading. We shouldn't call them insecticides, she insisted, but biocides, life killers. Because these sprays and dusts don't discriminate. They kill every bug, good and bad alike, silence the birds, kill the fish in streams, and stick around in the soil for years. One of the creepiest things about these chemicals is how long they last. Unlike poisons that break down quickly, the chlorinated hydrocarbons hang around for years. You can find aldrin in soil 4 years after spraying it. Toxaphene sticks around for at least a decade. Chlordane has been found 12 years after application. So every new spray just adds to what's already there, building up crazy amounts in the soil. Some apple orchards, sprayed year after year, had up to 113 pounds of DDT per acre in the soil. But the real danger, the secret behind the silent spraying, comes from something we now call biomagnification. Carson was one of the first to explain this to regular people. Because these chemicals dissolve in fat, they get stored in living things. Eating just 1 part per million in your diet can result in storing 10 to 15 parts per million in your body fat. This is where the poisoning chain begins. Imagine a field of alfalfa dusted with DDT. The alfalfa gets turned into meal and fed to chickens. The DDT shows up in their eggs. Or hay, with maybe 7 or 8 parts per million, gets fed to cows. The DDT appears in their milk. In butter made from that milk, the concentration can jump to 65 parts per million. Through this process, what started as a tiny amount becomes dangerously concentrated. The story of Clear Lake, California shows this horrifying process perfectly. Clear Lake was popular with fishermen, but also home to an annoying little gnat. In 1949, authorities decided to control the gnat using a chemical called DDD, closely related to DDT. They were super careful, applying just 1 part chemical for every 70 million parts of water. The gnat control worked. But the next winter, the western grebes on the lake started dying. More than 100 dead birds were found. These grebes are beautiful, swan-like birds that nest on the lake and eat its fish. After another spraying in 1957, even more died. When scientists analyzed the dead birds' fatty tissues, they were shocked. The birds were loaded with DDD at 600 parts per million. How was that even possible? The highest concentration ever put in the water was a tiny fraction of that. Carson explains it was like that old nursery rhyme, "The house that Jack built," one thing leading to another. The poison was picked up by the smallest organisms, the plankton, which concentrated it to about 5 parts per million, 25 times the amount in the water. Fish eating the plankton concentrated it more, to levels between 40 and 300 parts per million. And the fish-eating fish stored the most of all. One bullhead had an incredible 500 parts per million. The grebes, eating those fish, accumulated the poison to lethal levels. The poison hadn't left the lake. It had just woven itself into the fabric of life the lake supports. Even a year after the last spraying, all the fish, birds, and frogs examined still contained DDT. The grebe colonies shrank from over 1,000 pairs to about 30, and even those couldn't seem to produce babies. No young birds were seen on the lake. Clear Lake was a stark, terrifying demonstration of how poisons move through the food chain, and it was happening everywhere. This same deadly cycle destroyed the American robin. For millions of people, the first robin of spring is pure hope, a sign that winter's finally over. But in community after community across the Midwest and New England, robins were vanishing. The robin's fate, Carson reveals, was tragically tied to the American elm tree. A devastating fungus called Dutch elm disease was sweeping the country, and towns were desperately trying to save their magnificent elms by spraying them with DDT to kill the bark beetles spreading the fungus. At Michigan State University, 2 bird experts started documenting what happened next. In spring, migrating robins would return to campus like always. But soon, dead and dying birds started showing up. They had classic insecticide poisoning symptoms: losing balance, tremors, convulsions, death. The sprayed area had become a death trap. The scientists suspected robins weren't being poisoned directly, but by eating earthworms, the robin's main spring food. Another scientist, Dr. Roy Barker, traced the intricate chain of events. The DDT sprayed on elms coated the leaves. In autumn, leaves fell to the ground. Earthworms, munching on leaf litter, swallowed the insecticide, accumulating and concentrating it in their bodies. In spring, robins returned and feasted on poisoned worms. As few as 11 earthworms could deliver a lethal DDT dose to a robin. But death wasn't the only outcome. Sterility started spreading through bird populations. On Michigan State's campus, where there were once an estimated 370 adult robins, only a few dozen remained. In 1954, every nest being watched produced babies. By 1958, observers couldn't find a single baby robin anywhere on the main campus. Scientists found high DDT concentrations in the birds' reproductive organs. They documented nests with eggs that were incubated but never hatched. The insecticide stored in the egg yolk was passing from parent to embryo, basically a death sentence that killed the next generation before it could even begin. Robins were just the most visible victims. Heavy deaths occurred among about 90 bird species, ground feeders, treetop feeders, and predators alike. Woodcocks, great horned owls, red-shouldered hawks, and dozens of beloved songbirds were all found among the dead. And then there was America's national symbol, the bald eagle. Its populations had dropped alarmingly. On a Florida coast stretch where a naturalist named Charles Broley had banded over 1,000 young eagles over the years, he witnessed a catastrophic decline. In the early years, he'd find 125 active nests yearly. By 1957, only 43 were occupied, and 80% of those failed to produce babies. Adult eagles were still there, laying eggs, but the eggs weren't hatching. All the evidence pointed overwhelmingly to insecticides. The coastal marshes where eagles fed on fish had been repeatedly sprayed with DDT. Like the grebes and robins, eagles were storing poison in their bodies, and their ability to reproduce was being destroyed. The poison rain wasn't just falling on towns and farms. It was falling on great forests and the rivers flowing through them. Carson takes us to the Miramichi River in New Brunswick, Canada, one of the finest salmon streams in North America. For thousands of years, salmon had followed invisible paths from the deep Atlantic back to this river to spawn. But in the 1950s, the Canadian government began a massive spraying program, showering millions of forest acres with DDT to fight the spruce budworm. In June 1954, Planes flew over the Miramichi watershed. Soon after, trouble signs appeared. Dead and dying fish, including many young salmon, lined the stream banks. The aquatic insects that salmon and trout eat were completely wiped out. Before spraying, the stream was bursting with life. Now, there was nothing for young salmon to eat. Canadian scientists had been studying salmon in this river for years, so they could measure the destruction with chilling accuracy. By August, not a single newly hatched salmon remained. An entire year's spawning had been wiped out. The older young salmon did only slightly better. For every 6 that were in the stream before spraying, only 1 remained. The contamination, Carson showed, had seeped into every corner of our world. The soil, that thin layer controlling our very existence, was being turned into a sterile, poisoned medium. Poisons could persist there for over a decade, accumulating year after year. Arsenic from old sprays kept being absorbed by tobacco plants, leading to a 600% increase in cigarette arsenic content over 20 years. Carrots absorbed insecticides directly from soil, accumulating even higher concentrations than were in the soil itself. And then there was the water. The water pollution problem, Carson explains, is really the problem of polluting all of humanity's environment. Chemical sprays, applied to croplands, gardens, and forests, get washed out of the ground by rain and become part of water's universal journey to the sea. These poisons have been found in most major river systems and even in streams of groundwater flowing unseen through the earth. She tells the extraordinary story of the Rocky Mountain Arsenal near Denver, Colorado. For years, the arsenal had dumped chemical wastes into holding ponds. Farmers several miles away started reporting mysterious livestock sickness and extensive crop damage. It took 7 to 8 years for poisons to travel through hidden underground rivers of groundwater to contaminate their wells. But the most mysterious discovery was finding the weed killer 2,4-D in the water, a chemical never even manufactured at the arsenal. Chemists figured it had formed spontaneously in the open basins, as other chemicals interacted with air, water, and sunlight. This was terrifying. In lakes and streams everywhere, what dangerous new substances were being created from the witch's brew of chemicals we were dumping into our waters? With our world so thoroughly contaminated, could humans escape the effects? Carson turns her final, piercing focus on the human price. For the first time in history, every human being is now exposed to dangerous chemicals from conception until death. They're now stored in the bodies of the vast majority of people, regardless of age. They show up in mother's milk and even in tissues of unborn children. While a single large dose could cause acute poisoning, Carson was more worried about the delayed effects of absorbing small amounts of these chemicals over a lifetime. It's human nature, she notes, to shrug off vague threats of future disaster. But as the wise physician René Dubos said, some of their worst enemies creep on them unobtrusively. Carson explained there's an ecology inside our own bodies, just like in the world outside. A change at one point in one molecule can ripple through the entire system. The liver, our body's master detoxification organ, is especially vulnerable. Nearly all chlorinated hydrocarbons are liver poisons, capable of causing severe damage. A liver damaged by pesticides is less able to protect us from other poisons, throwing its whole range of vital activities into chaos. But the most serious, far-reaching effects happen at an even deeper level, inside individual body cells. Here, in tiny structures called mitochondria, the cell's powerhouses, the energy fueling all life is produced through cellular oxidation. This process is like a wheel, endlessly turning, with each step directed by a specific enzyme. Many pesticides can jam this wheel, destroying an enzyme or uncoupling energy production. When this happens, the cell becomes like a racing engine, generating heat but no usable power. The fires of life start going out. The German biochemist Otto Warburg, a Nobel Prize winner, developed a powerful theory about cancer's origin. He believed when a cell's respiration is damaged by a carcinogen, it struggles to survive by switching to a more primitive energy production method, fermentation. Over time, through many cell divisions, cells that can compensate through increased fermentation survive. When they reach the point of getting enough energy this way, they've become cancer cells, wild and uncontrolled. By this standard, Carson warns, many pesticides are perfect carcinogens, striking directly at cellular oxidation. The other road to disaster lies in our genetic heritage. Everyone knew radiation caused mutations, but few realized many chemicals could do the same. These radiomimetic chemicals, including many herbicides and insecticides, can damage chromosomes, interfere with normal cell division, and cause mutations leading to disease in individuals or future generations. The problem, Carson stressed, is we're never exposed to just one chemical. We're living in a sea of them, and their interactions are mysterious and unpredictable. We've been playing a terrible game of Russian roulette with our children's and grandchildren's health. So having risked so much trying to control nature, were we even succeeding? The final irony, Carson reveals, is we weren't. Nature was fighting back. Insects were developing resistance. Through natural selection that would have thrilled Darwin, chemical sprays were killing weak insects, leaving only the strong to survive and reproduce. After a few generations, populations of tough, resistant superbugs emerged. Before 1945, only about a dozen species were known to be resistant. By 1960, the number had soared to 137 and was climbing fast. Houseflies, lice, and mosquitoes, the very disease carriers we thought we'd conquered, were all developing resistance globally. We were on a chemical treadmill, forced to invent ever more toxic poisons just to stay in place. Even worse, our chemical assault was destroying the very system of checks and balances nature provides. We'd forgotten that the most effective insect control comes from nature herself. Insect predators and parasites, ladybugs, lacewings, praying mantises, parasitic wasps, are our true allies. Yet our broad-spectrum chemicals killed them indiscriminately, along with pests. With their enemies gone, pest insects would often surge back in greater numbers than before, a phenomenon entomologists call flareback. Farmers were trading one pest problem for a worse one, as spraying for Japanese beetles led to explosions of the much more destructive corn borer. But we don't have to keep going down this road. There is, Carson tells us, another road, the one less traveled by. It's a road of biological solutions, based on understanding and working with nature, not against it. She points to brilliant successes of true biological control. There was importing the Vidalia beetle from Australia in the 1880s, which saved California's citrus industry from cottony cushion scale for only $5,000. There was using an Argentine moth to destroy millions of acres of prickly pear cactus in Australia. And then there are new, imaginative approaches. The most spectacular is male sterilization technique. Scientists, led by Dr. Edward Nippling, found they could sterilize male screwworm flies with gamma rays and release them to mate with wild females. Since females mate only once, this produced only infertile eggs, and populations died out. On the island of Curaçao, the screwworm was wiped out in just 7 weeks. This triumph was repeated in Florida, where 3.5 billion sterilized flies were released, eliminating the pest in the southeast. Other methods hold similar promise. Scientists are developing lures and attractants based on insects' own chemical signals, using them to trap pests or confuse their mating behavior. They're harnessing insect diseases, viruses and bacteria deadly to specific pests, but harmless to everything else. Formulations of Bacillus thuringiensis, for example, contain a protein toxin that paralyzes and kills certain moth larvae, but is safe for everything else. These alternatives aren't pipe dreams. They're real, effective, and safe. They require a different way of thinking, an approach born not of arrogance but humility. The control of nature, Carson concludes, is a phrase conceived in arrogance, born of the Neanderthal age of biology and philosophy, when it was supposed that nature exists for the convenience of man. The other road, the road of biotic controls, offers our only chance to reach a destination that preserves our Earth. It's hard to overstate Silent Spring's impact. Before this book, environment wasn't really part of our public conversation. People trusted that progress meant harnessing nature, and the chemical industry was seen as a key ally in that project. Rachel Carson, with her quiet strength and bulletproof evidence, changed all that. She faced down an entire industry and endured vicious personal attacks, but she never backed down. Her work led directly to a nationwide DDT ban and restrictions on other persistent pesticides, passage of the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, and creation of the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States. She didn't just write a book. She ignited a global consciousness. What makes her message so powerful and timeless is it's not just about one chemical or one bird. It's about a fundamental way of seeing the world. She taught us to see the intricate connections, the web of life we're all part of. She showed us that an action in one place, spraying a field, dusting a forest, can have consequences rippling out in time and space in ways we could never predict. The robin dying on the lawn isn't an isolated event. It's the final, visible outcome of a long, invisible chain starting with a chemical in a factory. Today, more than 60 years after Silent Spring was published, we're still walking down the road she warned us about. DDT is gone, but it's been replaced by thousands of other chemicals, many just as dangerous, if not more so. We face new, monumental challenges: climate change, plastic pollution, biodiversity loss. But the root problem is the same one Carson identified: the arrogant belief we can impose our will on nature without consequences. We still operate under the dangerous delusion that we're separate from nature, that we can poison it without poisoning ourselves. The most powerful lesson in this book, especially as you stand at the beginning of your journey, isn't about despair, it's about empowerment. Carson ends not with doom predictions, but with a choice. The other road, she calls it, the road of wisdom, humility, and working with the natural world instead of against it. So what can you do? First, cultivate awareness. Just by listening today, you've taken a huge step. Start noticing the world around you. Pay attention to birds in your backyard, insects on plants, life in a simple patch of soil. Understand it's all connected, a complex and beautiful system. When you see a problem, an insect on a plant, a weed in the lawn, pause before reaching for a chemical solution. Ask yourself, what's the root cause? Is there a better, wiser way? Second, be a conscious consumer. The choices you make every day have power. Supporting local, organic farming when possible. Avoiding cosmetic pesticides on your own lawn. Questioning the products you buy. These aren't small acts. They're votes for the other road. They send a message that you value health, both for yourself and the planet. And finally, never lose your sense of wonder. That was a phrase Rachel Carson loved. She believed if we could maintain our childlike wonder at nature's beauty and complexity, we'd never want to destroy it. She wrote, "Silent Spring, not from anger, but from love. A deep, lasting love for the world and all its life." That love gave her courage to speak truth to power, and that same sense of connection offers us our best hope for the future. She proved that one voice, armed with knowledge and passion, can truly change the world. And now it's our turn to choose which road we'll take. That was a deep dive into Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. We've explored the main currents of her argument today. But here's the truth. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. The real magic happens when you travel there yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or simple, elegant phrase connects with you in an unexpected way. This podcast is here to help you decide if this book deserves your time and attention. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or stirred your conscience, grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you see your place in the world. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.